overtime magic, a Raptors test in Boston, and a court tug-of-war that could reshape Canadian law, all on a damp January Friday in Toronto. First, your Toronto weather, a high near 10 and a low around 0 degrees Celsius with some rain. Leafs fans, breathe out. Toronto snapped a 5-game road skid with a 2-1 overtime win in Philadelphia. Rookie Easton Cowan buried the winner 2:48 into OT off a John Tavares feed, capping a night where Dennis Hildeby stood tall. Huge stops in the extra frame preserved the points. Earlier, Konecny opened the scoring for the Flyers before leaving with an injury, and Scott Laughton, back in Philly, grabbed a short-handed equalizer in the third to set up the finish. It wasn't always pretty, but it was poised, exactly the kind of road result the Leafs have been chasing. Bank the confidence, because the schedule doesn't let up. On the hardwood, the Raptors roll into a measuring stick night against the Celtics. Toronto's 23-15, fourth in the East, riding a 3-game heater. Boston sits 23-13, one spot ahead. The Celtics shoot it efficiently, 47.4% from the field, better than the 45.9% Toronto typically allows. They've weirdly struggled to share it, last in the conference in assists, even with Derek White pacing them at 5.3 a night. The last time these teams met, Boston won 112-96. For the Raptors, Scotty Barnes continues to be the fulcrum. 19.1 points, 8.4 boards, 5.2 assists. And if Toronto is going to flip the script, it starts with winning the math at the arc and protecting the paint without giving up kick-out threes. Expect a playoff vibe. Baseball notes before we pivot national. The Blue Jays locked in 2 key pieces ahead of the 2025 arbitration deadline. Ernie Clement avoided arbitration with a $4.6 million deal for 2026 after a breakout campaign. 4.3 WAR, a .277 average with 151 hits, and a postseason heater highlighted by 30 hits in 18 World Series games. Dalton Varsho also settled, reportedly at $10.75 million. Despite battling injuries, he still posted 20 homers, an .833 OPS, and another Gold Glove in 2024. The Jays keep cost certainty on 2 core contributors. Clement is under control through 2028, giving them flexibility as they navigate a competitive AL race. Nationally, a big constitutional drumbeat. Canadian judges are invalidating pieces of Parliament's penal code at a pace that's got people across the aisle debating judicial activism and the balance of power. The thrust isn't just courts versus Parliament. The message is that all 3 branches, legislative, executive, and judiciary, are implicated in how criminal laws are drafted, implemented, and challenged. For Toronto listeners, this is not abstract. These rulings ripple through sentencing, policing, and prosecution priorities on the ground. Expect more conversations about how to write laws that meet constitutional muster the first time, and what reforms might smooth the churn of court challenges. You can already see those fault lines in a trio of cases moving through Canadian courts. The Supreme Court of Canada will hear an appeal from Ontario Place protectors, challenging a provincial law that helps pave the way for a major Ontario Place redevelopment, including a large private spa, amid questions about exemptions from environmental and heritage rules. In Manitoba, a former PC leadership candidate is suing to restore permits for off-road polar bear ecotourism, alleging misfeasance and discrimination after approvals were pulled. And in Saskatchewan, a civil suit by former students against Legacy Christian Academy, alleging abuse, hit a procedural wall when a judge stayed the case, calling a delay in disclosing settlement agreements an abuse of process. Each file underscores how process, transparency, and legislative carve-outs are under a brighter spotlight, and how courts are increasingly central in refereeing those disputes. Travel plans changing? Airlines say very possibly. Major Canadian carriers trimmed U.S.-bound flights more than 14% in the fourth quarter, with sharp pullbacks to Florida, California, and a 33% drop to Las Vegas. At the same time, they've leaned into sun elsewhere, up 36% to the Caribbean and South America last quarter, and up 45% this quarter. Rising costs and politics are part of the story. Canadian travelers are reacting to policies under President Donald Trump and a new $100 fee for non-citizens at certain U.S. national parks. An America First pricing move doesn't help the welcome mat. History suggests Canadians eventually wander back stateside, but for now, the beach chairs are shifting south of the usual South. Energy and geopolitics intersect with climate and competitiveness in Ottawa's latest stance on Venezuela. Prime Minister Mark Carney says Canadian oil remains cheaper, cleaner, and lower risk than Venezuelan supply, even as the U.S. asserts itself around Venezuelan oil infrastructure following military actions. Carney argues Canada's diversifying beyond the U.S. market and aligning with Alberta's Pathways project to strengthen the sector's edge. Venezuela still sits atop immense reserves, but years of mismanagement and sanctions have gutted production. For Canada, the takeaway is twofold. Don't bet the farm on a single buyer, and keep pushing the emissions profile lower if you want to win barrels and social license at the same time. Back to Ontario, where day-to-day rules and realities are hitting home. In Brockville, residents of an apartment building say they feel unsafe after a temporary warming center for the homeless opened inside, following the closure of a local overnight shelter. It's a snapshot of the housing and social services crunch. Real needs, real tensions, imperfect spaces. In Central Elgin, a new bylaw requires licenses for short-term rentals on platforms like Airbnb, including fire inspections and building code compliance. Supporters call it a safety baseline. Hosts call it red tape. And in mobile home parks, homeowners and realtors are accusing some park communities of squeezing lot rents and using the right of first refusal. That complicates sales and transfer of leases and rent control. Affordability is more than home prices. It's the fine print that decides whether people can stay put. Quick skate around the league. The Oilers staged a 4-3 comeback win over the Jets, with Evan Bouchard tallying a goal and an assist, and Connor McDavid adding one of each. Winnipeg's winless slide is now at 11. In Montreal, Alexandre Texier recorded a hat trick as the Canadiens thumped the Panthers 6-2, their third straight win and fourth in a row at the Bell Centre. Florida's road trip is off to a rocky start without leading scorer Brad Marchand. Out west, the Calgary Flames report card tells a clear story. Defense good, offense not so much. Calgary sits 30th in goals per game and last on the power play, but they're 12th in goals against and 11th on the penalty kill. Rasmus Andersson continues to drive the blue line, leading Flames defenders in most offensive categories, logging the heaviest minutes, and he's punched his ticket to Team Sweden for the 2026 Winter Olympics. If the forwards can heat up, the foundation is already there. Before we wrap, one last nod to tonight's Toronto sports energy. The Leafs' overtime grit should give them some juice, and the Raptors face a genuine barometer in Boston. If Barnes attacks early and often, and if Toronto turns Boston's shaky ball movement into turnovers, the Raps can make this interesting late. That's it for today. If you like having your Toronto headlines, national context, and sports in one place, follow and share the show. It helps more than you know. I'll be back with updates, and yes, we'll be watching the courts, the consoles at Pearson, and the standings. Stay dry out there.